Good evening, welcome all. I have 5:30 Pacific Daylight Savings Time. Thank you all for joining us. This is the fourth week, I think. You're currently muted. You're able to type your questions in the chat, and we'll leave 20 minutes towards the end to answer your questions. We have lots to talk about today. It's going to be very interactive. I am going to pass to Anna, and Roxanne to start.
Hi there. Anyway, can you forward the slide deck? Okay, so we've already had you input into the chat your name, your region, and your feeding gap, if any. Next slide. I'm Anna Lane. I am the co-feeding lead for Northern California Coastal Region, and I'm also the Marin County Feeding Coordinator. My partner is Roxanne Anderson. She is the co-lead for Northern California Coastal Region, and we will be presenting the session tonight. To start, we'd like to have you all raise your hand if you have any of the following feeding experiences: with Red Cross, with a job at work, with your church, social function, or other feeding like team sports. And we want to see a whole bunch of hands because I bet a lot of you have done feeding. So let's see what it looks like. Anyway, do you know how to look at the total view?
Yes, we currently have 46 people raise their hands.
That's great. And that would say what, about 50% of all the people who are attending today?
About a third. We currently have 130 people on the chat currently.
Wow. Okay, that's great. Super. So the rest of you are going to get an intro into feeding that we'll talk about, and then you'll be able to go out and do it yourself. Next slide. Okay, so this is, rather than a table of contents, this is actually a roadmap of what the session will cover. And we wanted to give you information that will help enhance your local team's effort and the ability to respond quickly, to reduce anxiety, so you'll know what to do, because as you all know, an event starts locally. And so, to be able to respond and have an idea of what to do, I'll also know that the main thing is to be flexible, because things will change. So we want to be able to give you the information, but also reduce any anxiety. And part of that will come from the acceptance of knowing things will change. Okay, so we're going to be talking about general background, who we feed, etc., types of feeding, how to get the food, and then ordering food from, how to get the food from local partners or national partners, and then going to local resources, and then we'll close with a reinforcement of the national effort on DEI. So that's basically what we're going to cover tonight. Next slide. And this is Roxanne, will take you through the section.
Hey, thank you, Anna. So we're going to start with who gets fed. So now when you respond to a DAT call or disaster-affected areas, you're picking up on key bits of information that's going to help determine who gets fed. So you may see that homes are inhabitable, an area may have no electricity, or you learn that there's no water, or that mandatory evacuation orders are in place. It's not only these individuals, families, and communities that we provide food, snacks, and water to. It's offered to everyone who needs it during a disaster response, whether they're clients, first responders, or others, including partners, utility workers, and other relief agencies who are assisting in the response. Next slide, please. So who does the feeding? Well, there are many variables that determine who may provide meals. And the questions that have to be asked are, who and what's been impacted? What are the needs? Have the needs been met, and by whom? It's a data-driven decision, and it takes a collaborative discussion with other agencies to determine who will do the feeding. Red Cross may step up and say that we'll feed and we'll take the lead on feeding. A county agency or county may say they have feeding covered and they'll take lead. Or county may advise later that their feeding needs have not been met and ask Red Cross to help. It's these types of conversations that take place on different levels depending on the level of the disaster response, and it may involve several agencies or other organizations. Next slide, please. So there are several types of feeding. The 4 common methods are canteening, congregate, non-congregate feeding, in addition to outreach feeding, which provides meals and beverages by 2 common methods that we generally know as mobile and fixed feeding. Canteening can last for less than an hour, or it can take place over days. It's actually providing snacks and beverages and making them available for shelter clients, responders, and others outside of scheduled meal times. And sometimes light meals are provided, for example, to meet the need of first responders such as firefighters in their high caloric intake, or long DAT calls. At response locations that are in or near the affected areas, canteening is often accomplished using IRVs. So now with congregate feeding, that implies that meals, which is a continental breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and beverages, are provided at a shelter. With congregate feeding, the bulk meals are generally served cafeteria style, which means that the server provides the banquet pack, that utensil set with the napkin and the plate. The client makes their selection, and as the server or the client, it's an option, just goes ahead and moves the plate down the line. Now with congregate feeding, realize that ice water in Cambros or in any other container can enhance the growth, spread, and transfer of viruses and bacteria. And you've heard of it before. What am I going to say? Norovirus. Handle water as if it were a snack. It should not be self-served. Now with non-congregate feeding is individually individually packed meals, which are also known as IPMs, are served. Non-congregate feeding implies that the meals, snacks, and beverages are provided to clients not at a shelter, but a location with separate living space like hotels, motels, or dormitories. Now, unlike congregate feeding, meals may be provided by the hotel. Bulk food from Cambros may be transferred into clamshells, or the individually prepared meals from vendors are used. The meals are then delivered to the client's rooms with snacks and water, and typically a continental breakfast items are generally packaged and delivered with the client's dinner meal so that they can have it the next morning. An alternative to this room-to-room delivery service is just setting up a designated area at set times at the hotel for the meals to be picked up. For mobile feeding is not only distributing meals to clients in an IRV, it also includes the community outreach. It's also known as Seek and Serve. The purpose is for an on-the-ground verified needs assessment, during which time snacks, water, and possibly shelf-stable meals are provided by the IRV crews. Mobile feeding also includes designated feeding routes for IRV teams, and there's also the fixed site feeding. And the fixed site feeding takes place not at a shelter, but a location where service delivery is provided and a time where individuals and families affected by a disaster will be present. And you've probably done fixed site feeding, such as places, or seen it at places such as churches, parks, parking lots, assistance centers, or where emergency responders are working. Now I'm going to also add mass casualty feeding. Feeding during mass casualty incidents generally occur in 2 forms, and that's canteening for families and or responders, and congregate feeding at family reception centers or family assistance centers. Now, although the process is similar to disaster feeding, there are some unique considerations that are worth mentioning. When canteening or feeding, feed disaster survivors and emergency workers at separate sites. Provide feeding on a 24-hour basis, and avoid items that may have negative visual connotations in relation to the incident, such as meat with bones, white rice, barbecue, and red sauces, etc. Next slide, please. So this exercise was added to demonstrate the dynamic needs, the ongoing assessments, and changing service requests. So real quick, we're going to answer the questions. You can answer them yourselves that are on the right-hand side, and then you're going to match with the feeding method on the left-hand side, and then you're going to match with the feeding method on the left. So I'll go ahead and read the first, all of them. Okay, so first responders to a grass fire. Look on the right. What feeding method would you choose? Okay, it's relatively short duration. Light meals could be provided. Did you choose canteening? Would you consider fixed site feeding if the fire took longer to contain and firefighters took breaks, and often and at designated locations? What if the fire is being fought from different locations? Would you consider mobile feeding if it was safe and accessible? Go on to the next one. 12 families affected by an apartment fire, and they're sheltered at motels. What did you choose? Non-congregate feeding? And if there's a question about this choice, motels do provide separate living space. Mudslides. Evacuation of a hillside where 30 families are sheltered overnight at a high school gym. What did you choose? I'm not going to give you much time for this one. Congregate feeding, right? Did you also choose canteening? So the last one, community returned after evacuating, but they have no electricity and no running water. I'm sure most of you, if not all, chose mobile feeding. But what kind of mobile feeding are you going to be doing? You're going to do outreach so you can serve mobile feeding? Or are you going to do mobile feeding with routes? Did you think about fixed feeding as well? This exercise was to let you know, or to get you to think how the different types of scenarios in feeding there are, and know that there are several methods to meet them. So with that, Anna, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. And that's very informative. The other thing that we learned from what you just did was there are many ways to attack the issue and to develop the right, there's not a right response, but basically a response. So now we're going into talking about types of feeding and how to start. So the first thing you want to do is gather information. And here's kind of a checklist. The blue font are the items that you absolutely have to know right away. Who your clients are, the demographics, that information may come a little bit later, but where are you going to be feeding is critical. You've got to know your location. What is your first meal and when should it be served? And I've been in a situation before where I was deployed and learned I need to feed almost 200 people in about 4 hours. So, you got to know what that target first effort is going to be. And then how many meals are needed. Of course, that's extremely critical. You also would like to know if there are any dietary, religious, or cultural restrictions. That information may not be available for that very first meal. And one way to help accommodate it is if you order some of your meals as vegetarian meals, because you might be able to then satisfy a need where a particular protein is not accepted for that person. Do you have people to go pick them up and deliver? So you've got to have support staff or runners. Get the people on in your chapter. Make sure you have help. And then how do you pay for those meals? Who has the P card and how much of is on your limit? Make sure that you're able to cover the entire amount of that meal. Later on, you'll learn how many days you expect to feed, but that's kind of an important piece that you'd like to learn as soon as you can. And then our last session, Mary talked about the need for the meals to be nutritious. And, she used the word cuisine because that's an up level from just feeding cattle, kind of just high dense calorie meals. You want to make sure your meals are healthy, they're appropriate, and they're appealing. So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered. And as you gather that information, it's really good to kind of capture it on a piece of paper, in a notebook, et cetera, because it's very easy to lose track of who said what and what your actual information is, and actually as you update the information. Next, where to get the food? Well, based on that information that you gather, you can select the appropriate feeding type resource. If you got a large number, a large volume in your clientele, you're going to start the conversation with the feeding partner, but simultaneously you'll have to go get food for the immediate meal. Find out when your feeding partner can start. Often a feeding partner like the Salvation Army or Southern Baptists will need a couple of days to get set up and start. They need to get their volunteers together, they need to get their equipment, et cetera, find either a commercial kitchen or move their mobile kitchen. So you're going to want for them to have that lead time. Meanwhile, you might need to take care of the immediate need. And then also keep in mind, there's paperwork on the back end. So you'll need the 6409s, and if you charge on a P card, make sure to get photocopies of all receipts. Okay,
Anna,
next.
could you explain to us what 6409 is?
That's something that people have to learn to deal with. It's paperwork. And anyway, I'm sure you know definitely how to process that information, but it's a form that's required for any expenditure. And whether you are using a national feeding partner where there's an MOU in place like the Salvation Army, or if you are using a P card to buy, a meal at the local fast food, all of those expenditures need to be documented by a form that's called 6409. And they also need to be submitted for approvals. This is a slide that comes from the feeding toolkit, and it describes some of the national feeding partners. Now, we're not going to go into the detail of all of these different possible vendors. They're not all present in all regions, all divisions. This is kind of a general list, but there are a number of MOUs, and that link, the hot link on the right-hand side, is one where you can actually see a list of all MOUs for the Red Cross. That includes other, it's not just feeding vendors or partners, it's all kinds of MOUs. But also keep in mind that some require, like World Central Kitchen requires that Lauren Myers activates them. They're not ones that you can activate yourself, but you can actually look at some of the MOUs if you care to. Next. Okay, so the feeding vendors will vary in what they are able to do. And, these are ones that I'm more familiar with in NCCR and Gold Country, but Salvation Army, Southern Baptist, they'll do 3 meals a day. World Central Kitchen will only do lunch and dinner. Off the Grid, who we use frequently in California, lunch and dinner, and Mercy Chefs are 3 meals. So when you do engage with a feeding partner, make sure it's clear to you which meals they will cover. Okay, next. And here's just kind of a general scenario of what it might look like if you are in a shelter and you have a different populations. So in a very large shelter with 100 or more, you will very likely be able to engage a feeding partner. And your meals the support to serve the meals can be provided by the volunteers that come in with the partner. You might need to work with the shelter manager to make sure that shelter support is also available. But very likely you can count on having Red Cross feeding staff if it's a very large shelter. So for example, at Reno, when we had 400, yeah, we had feeding people present to support the sheltering staff. But in a smaller or medium shelter, you may or may not have Red Cross feeding staff. You can very often get a feeding partner to help support you. Or you might be doing a combination of a feeding partner and getting the food from local restaurants and caterers, et cetera. And in that case, a feeding team or a shelter team might need to work together to gather those meals. When you're in a smaller shelter of 30 or less, then there is no feeding partner. They usually have a minimum of 30 or more. And so the meals need to be acquired by the Red Cross from restaurants and caterers, et cetera. And you likely will not have feeding staff present at the shelter. So shelter staff will need to pick up and serve the meals. In some cases, can you go to the next slide? Yeah. No, back up, sorry. So in some cases, if you have several shelters and you can combine them, if they're close by, the count can be combined, and the feeding partner may be willing to provide the meals with a combined count of over 30. So keep that in mind, that you might be able to get them to go along with it if the driving distance is, you know, reasonably close by. Okay, next slide. Your feeding partners are actually, they're partners, they're not a vendor. And it's really important to have a good relationship with them, not only because they are working towards the same end as we to help support people affected by a disaster, but also it's very possible you'll see them again. And these are people who, you know, they deploy, they're repeat volunteers, and they help make our mission possible, and that it works better to have a good relationship with them. So in asking the Salvation Army and Southern Baptist, what's the one thing you'd like local chapters to know that will make the feeding partnership smoother? And these are the responses. So Laura Johnson, who's a very wonderful person who's been with Southern Baptist for a while, and she's saying coordination between agencies at the local level. And so that's, you know, having that dialogue and the communication. And Amy, who has now taken the lead for the Salvation Army, many of you may know Patrick McGinn, and he's moved on. So, but Amy's been with the Salvation Army in her role for quite a while, so she's very knowledgeable, she's great. And she mentioned communication at least once a day, utilizing a clear and consistent line of communication. So, you know, they basically these are repeat volunteer partners. And so they are pretty well structured, and they do support the incident command system model where it's clear who the lead is and you know, the reporting relationship. And so from her perspective, knowing who the contact person is and having that dialogue between the single points of contact would help make the relationship and the task move forward more easily, and it's probably with less tension or miscommunication, et cetera. And they are our partners, and it's really good to treat them with appreciation and respect. Next. Other options than partners. If you have fewer than 30 clients, you have restaurants, as we mentioned earlier, caterers, and also local meal support systems like Ceres or Meals on Wheels, et cetera, that we have in Northern California coastal region, you have different ones in other states like Hawaii or Alaska, Oregon, etc. So learn what your potential local relationships are, and that's a great thing to do in steady state. The other thing that we found is finding a good caterer is actually very helpful, because if you're going to do mobile, it's often easier to get the volume through a caterer. So try to see if you can get a caterer or two in your region. And then this is the comment from before. You may be able to combine counts for getting the food from a partner if each individual shelter is lower than the 30 minimum. All right, next. And Roxanne will take you through an exercise to help with how you can order from local restaurants if you don't already have that particular restaurant in your Blue Skies list of relationships.
Okay, thank you, Anna. So piggybacking on what Anna was just explaining, so during your response, you may have to begin the feeding operation or supplement feeding needs. So here are some quick resources for finding local vendors if a resource list isn't available to you. So on this page that we're looking at now, this is a screenshot of a Google map. Most of you are familiar with finding places near you. Well, you can do the same thing for finding a restaurant near me. You can see in the lower left corner here, that's the shelter. So in searching restaurants near me, which is the shelter, it populated all of the restaurants that are in close proximity, which you can click on each one and you can look for something that's viable for your needs at that time. It's a little tedious and a little time consuming, but it does work. Now on the next slide, what we are looking at is we're looking at TripAdvisor. You can do the same thing. You can restaurants near me, however you want to state it, and use TripAdvisor. With TripAdvisor, as you can see, it populates all the restaurants. You see photos of them, and then you can also do, you can filter and you can select your specific criteria, and it will bring, that's exactly what it's going to bring up for you. You can see on the image here, you can see the distances. There are some visual cost indicators, the dollar signs, the reviews. Some of them have menus that you can look at immediately. And as we're just doing this cursory look, you see Pioneer Cafe at the top, good reviews. It has, I believe, over on the left-hand side, $1 symbol. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to look at what Pioneer Cafe has to say. Or show us. That hamburger looks good, doesn't it? But what else? Look at their menu. You think this looks like it's going to, yeah, right. That looks pretty good, but I don't think that it's going to meet our budget. So what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and we are going to move to the next slide. And so this is another TripAdvisor from the same query that we had. It's the Taqueria. And what do you see about this? What do you notice? The prices are, yeah, they're reasonable. And then what else do you notice? It's vegetarian friendly. It shows over here that they are vegetarian friendly, and they do serve lunch and dinner, and they have good reviews. So this is a so-so. So we'll go back and we're going to choose another one from TripAdvisor. Next slide. El Pollo Loco. Now, what do you think about this one? Multifamily meals combined. You got proteins, you got starches, and you got veggies. that could be doable. Let's go ahead and let's look at their menu. Next slide. Yeah, look at this. So there's even a taco menu, a decent looking salad. This looks like it might work. And what do you think? You could have chicken, you could have tacos, or you could have both. So this looks like it's might work, but I would, and you should too. Let's check just a little bit further. We have time. We have Denny's. So what do you notice about this choice? I immediately noticed that there's Grubhub delivery service, but I have to ask, is there a fee? I don't typically use services like this, but they are good in some cases where you can't pick up your meals. They serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They have brunch. As Iwe is pointing out, the biggest thing, 24 hours. Their prices are reasonable. We know that they have a variety of meals, and they should be able to meet most dietary needs. So this looks like it's a great resource, maybe not for every day, but it's something to keep on file. Now, these are quick tools that can be useful. However, it should not be used to replace or establishing current feeding agreements. So with that, Anna?
Anna, we
Great,
have 9
yeah.
minutes left.
I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, so we want to reinforce that feeding has a very fluid nature. Things change very quickly. You're going to have, a shelter population that can exponentially grow overnight. And so your feeding need will, of course, put you in a panic, but just take it easy, be very calm, and know that the fact that it changes rapidly is normal. So it's going to be, it'll go up, it'll come down, just roll with it. And then because those counts can change so quickly, you're going to be moving from one type of feeding to another type. You might be moving from a feeding partner and then going down to having to get your meals yourself from the restaurant as that population is able to go back because the mandatory requirement has been lifted and they can go home. Or they can go home, but they have no water, they have no utilities, so maybe they can stay in their homes, but then the mobile community outreach happens, and so that's another way to satisfy what they need without them having to stay in a shelter. It's really important that the information be up to date and that it's communicated to your team, to the sheltering team, and to your partners so that everybody's on the same page. And that's one of the hardest things to do, is to keep that information flow current. So having a daily meeting that includes your feeding partner is a one way to do it efficiently and effectively. Stay in touch with your counterpart, and then with the resources of the food, and just know that it'll change day to day. So, and that concludes. Oh, the next one, please. So there's a national effort to identify diverse suppliers, and the diverse supplier is actually the company that's owned, operated, controlled, whether it's minorities, women, veterans, disabled vets, LGBTQ, or a disabled person. And the diverse supplier is actually certified by a third party. So in the agreement packet, there's a checkoff to determine whether or not that is a diverse supplier, and that is an objective of the national feeding group. It's an objective for the Red Cross that we support diversity. And the reason it's been included as part of what feeding does is because of the buying power. That feeding spend is huge for any kind of disaster. That's one of, or about the most costly item aside from rooms if we end up doing non-congregate. So it actually is a way to really leverage the influence of the Red Cross to help support the diverse community. And so it's a real benefit if you can identify those and make sure that they are included in your resourcing. So there are links here on this page where you can find out more. And there's actually a recorded MassCare webinar on YouTube where Lauren Myers talks about the diversity effort. And then next page, we're going to go to questions. But before we do that, I want to point out a page at the end that was included in case you have, yeah. So if you're interested in looking at national MOU information, at the back of the deck, there is a link to all the Red Cross MOUs, and then also separate ones for the Salvation Army MOU and for the Southern Baptist MOU. Okay, back to Yi-Wei for questions.
Thank you so much, Anna and Roxanne. I think we're doing super good on time. It's only 6:06 Pacific time, so we have about 24 minutes left.
You told me we had to give you 20.
And I remember real quick that I didn't say much at the beginning. I only said probably one sentence, so that's good. Before we start taking questions, I know I talked a lot last time. Before we jump into questions, I'd like to remind you for our next session. So this session, we talked about the different types of feeding. And next session, we're going to talk about how to pay for foods and the local partners in steady states and operational states. So I welcome you all to join us next week, same time, same link. And feel free to type your questions in the chat or raise your hand. I'm going to start muting people. While we're waiting for questions, I do want to mention Betsy's comment. Betsy is one of our job directors, and she said operation is also going to need to know if there are more meals delivered than shelter residents are eating. We'd like to know, what the status is so we can cut back when needed, or we can order more when it's needed.
Yeah, okay. That's really important.
And we have one question here for the team that do we have to have contracts ahead of time for caterers?
No, you can do them. If you identify a caterer and you have a feeding need, like, so for example, we had a situation with the atmospheric floods last March and initiated a mobile outreach feeding program where we needed like 400 meals each flight. And we got a new caterer. You're going to have to do that agreement for each DRO separately anyway. They don't keep track of them. So you'll get the agreement and then submit that. It's good to have the conversation, though, in advance with the caterers, because you'll have to do the paperwork at the time, fresh paperwork. But if you know who you're going to be working with and they are familiar with the contract, that's even better. So.
And I'd just like to add to that. So we do not enter into contracts. So when it comes to feeding, if you're using a vendor or a caterer, especially during routinely, especially during a disaster response, you want to make sure that you get that feeding supplier packet agreement completed. With that, that's the way of payment. We are assured that what we need is going to be supplied by the vendor or the caterer and it's non-binding. However, it is a formal agreement that that we can hold them to in actually release them if they don't abide by what the agreement says. And as you're in your response, maintain all of these agreements, maintain all these contacts that you have so that you can build a file for the next time.
Thank you, Roxanne and Anna. So the feeding tool, the feeding agreement, the packet is going to be in the feeding kit, and it will be in the link that will be sent out after the session. Mary, I think your hand is up. Would you like to say something?
You know what? I'll wait to the end because I want to follow up on last week's big burning question about feeding persons with disabilities.
Thank you so much, Mary. And okay, let's see, next question. For the team, using a vendor, can we request the food items they supply? And if they're supplying meals that are not very yummy?
I'm not real clear on the first part of the question. Can you repeat that?
Jane, would you like to come off mute and ask your question verbally? Scallon?
I can. Thank you, Iwe. So my question goes to when we are provided meals using a specific vendor, and maybe they're kind of yucky. So could we possibly request, you know, at some time that the meals be improved? Is that part of the conversation the feeding group has?
This is Anna. So yes, you can. And by the way, I did have that conversation with Patrick at one point because the clients were getting the meals were repetitious and they were getting tired of it. And so he said that feedback is totally welcome. I mean, if this comments are coming and we have the dialogue with our feeding partners, then they will accommodate us. And I think that, you know, their desire is to do a good job. Their desire is that we have happy clients, and the information that we give them is actually welcome. You don't want to do it in a way that's critical, that's aggressive, or, you know, that's not positive. But if you take it from the perspective of working together to do a good job for our clients, they're very receptive to it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good question, by the way. It's a really good one.
Thank you. And another question, can we use food trucks or other resources that we might have depending on the county and the jurisdictions that we're in?
Yes, and so actually Mary responded, if they're approved by the county and the health department. Not only are they a lifesaver, we actually ended up having food trucks at the Porterville shelter aqueduct, the atmospheric floods event, where we had a sizable population, and our vendor was off the grid. Off the grid sources their food from restaurants and or food trucks. So they actually had the food truck come to the shelter, and the clients loved it because it gives them something to do. I mean, when you think about being in a shelter for all those hours with not a whole lot to do, it kind of brightens up their day. The one thing you have to be careful about, of course, is not have this menu that's extensive and that's not, you know, within what you're agreed to with the cost. So you have to monitor that, and make sure that, you know, that everything is falling within the expectation. But the food truck itself was, people look forward to it. They liked it.
Thank you. I saw one comment earlier, several comments earlier saying that we should have this session after we had dinner. Now we're all hungry, craving for food. Okay, we have the next question. How is usually the food delivered from the caterer? Is it prepackaged? Is it buffet style? Anyone wants to take that?
From
I
my,
can-
go ahead, Roxanne, you do it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it depends.
Mhm.
If it's if you're feeding, like, say, it depends on the situation. It depends on who you're feeding. As far as the caterer goes, if you're just talking about feeding headquarters staff, that kind of thing, usually it can come in bulk in the trays. Or it can, or it can be individually packaged meals where it's a 3-course meal in a container. So it depends, and you can make that stipulation when you are making the order. So you know what your setup is, you know what you would like to have, and you can ask them if they could individually prepare it or serve it in the trays. Does that answer your question?
This is Mary. Let me just make a comment about the catering and the cafeteria style. We are still not doing self-serving of food. So I get a little concerned when I see buffet style versus cafeteria. Red Cross or the partner is still serving, whether it's coming out of a large hotel pan or foil pan, disposable foil pan from a restaurant or a Cambro. Red Cross or the partner will be serving the meal to the client, either on a plate or in a clamshell. It's not a buffet where clients are self-serving their own food. Just want to be clear about that.
Thank you, Roxanne and Mary. Okay, we have several questions asking for this, and we touched briefly on this in the past sessions as well, is what is the typical budget for lunch or dinner or breakfast? And how do we figure that out? What is our budget? Anyone wants to take that?
That's changed. It used to be that we needed to adhere to my target. I used to target $25 a day, and I would go over that sometimes. But the person who's actually going to be determining what your spend is the person who's in charge of the event, the lead. More than likely, though, because there is the new focus or a focus on nutritious meals, good meals, it's going to, and because of inflation, it'll hit more than the 25. I try to target $35 a day per person. But again, you've got to be reasonable. Like, what can you get where you are? And what can you get that's not extravagant, but not fast food? And so I think that's how you have to approach it. It's not a per dollar, but be reasonable, be practical. If you're dealing with your national partners, they have a set amount. It's part of their national agreement on what the cost is going to be to you.
So let me add. Let me just add, Heinrich. I don't know if you were on the session last time, but there is no typical budget for lunch or dinner meals. There is no national standard. It's going to be different in every different area. So the important thing is to follow the, help me out here, the disaster program.
Service delivery plan.
The service delivery plan. Thank you, Iwei. Your SDP, that will actually have a budget for you. And if you are finding you are unable to get healthy, appealing, nutritious meals for that dollar amount, you need to go back to your mass care chief
Yep.
or your immediate supervisor. If it's a larger disaster operation, then your HQ feeding lead. But to answer your question, what's the typical budget? There isn't a typical budget. It's going to be different in Florida than it is in Alaska, than it is in Los Angeles.
But you want to be practical and reasonable. I mean, just use your judgment.
Thank you. And to to summarize all of that, when we have an operation, your leadership team, your operations, assistant director of operations, massacre chiefs, job directors, they're going to sit down together and determine the budget, the predicted budget, which is the service delivery plan. In there, the massacre chief, along with all the job directors and assistant directors of operations, they are going to determine what the appropriate budget is for that specific region or the disaster. And once we determine that, then that budget will be related to the team. And when there's any changes or modifications, that we can go along with that as well. Betsy, I see your hand up. Would you like to add something to it? Betsy, if you're talking, we cannot hear you.
Oh dear. I can hear oh, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
And do you have an echo?
No.
No.
Good, that's just me then. All right. So as a director, when we are budgeting, we're looking at around $30 a day. And remember, that includes continental breakfast and then 2 meals. So that's how we get it around there. So to what Mary and Anna are saying, while there is no absolute, if you're asking if there's sort of a rule of thumb, that's sort of a point of reference. That's all.
Thank you, Betsy. And like I mentioned earlier, Betsy is one of our job directors. She was the job director for Guam, and she was the job director for many other operations. So it really, and it goes back to the main focus that quality over quantity. And if you're seeing any things that doesn't match, reach out to your supervisor and talk it through to see if we can better serve our clients. Okay, we have 8 more minutes that we can take questions. How do we, for the team, how do we keep the food items hot or cold enough to be safe for an extended periods of time?
I would say we cannot keep it for extended periods. I mean, basically, when we get food, we need to say if you're getting it from a restaurant, you want to target a certain time frame. This is why you look at the Google map to find out how far it is, to make sure that you're not driving, an hour and a half to deliver the food. It's got to be close by. And you want to make sure you take that temperature. You've got to monitor it. If it's going to be hot, a lot of times you can go pick it up and put it in the Cambro. When we use our feeding partners, they use the Cambros, or even a caterer can use the Cambro, and then bring it directly, serve it, and then refrigerate it immediately if you need to put it, if you're not going to use all of it. The other thing that is helpful is to identify a place, if possible, that is close by that might take excess food. So if we have a lot, quite a volume of extra food, maybe there's a homeless shelter or a shelter close by that can utilize it before it falls out of that safe time frame of, the temperature and the time.
Remember your rule of 4.
Yep.
Between 40 and 140 degrees for 4 hours, or throw it out. So if you have to go an hour to pick up food, that's 1 hour. The food is coming back at less than 140 degrees. So just remember your rule of 4. 40 degrees, between 40 and 140 for 4 hours, or throw it out. You cannot hold it longer.
Thank you. Another question is, when we feed, we mentioned earlier we're going to feed first responders, anyone affected by the disaster, and also our own workforce. So can our team share that? How are we going to feed them separately, or are we going to feed them together?
I missed the last part of that question.
How would you, so when you're feeding our own workforce, do you feed them separately from the general population, or do you feed them together? Or if they're in a congregate shelter, do we serve the meals all together for our own workforce?
I would say that they come in after the clients have fed. I mean, not the first responders, they should go in, right away, but our workforce would come in afterwards. What we've done before is also often the workforce, especially if they're senior management, they're in a different room. And so we would just take the food, some of the food there for them, because they've been working pretty hard. They can't leave, they're putting in 10, 12 hours. So it really, you would feed them, but how you do it will depend on where you are.
Thank you. And the bottom line is we do feed everyone. We do feed our own workforce. And there are really, different ways and different depending on where you are. If you're on a plane or if you're heading there, you might be able to use your mission card to get your own food instead of waiting for someone else to order for you. Okay, we saw some comments and I'd like to hear more in the chat, is that I saw multiple people mentioning that the hours has changed from 4 hours to 2 hours. If you have that information, please drop in the chat if there's a link. Okay, let's go to the next question. We have 4 minutes left. We're talking about the temperatures. So is there a requirement that we take our own thermometers to the restaurant when picking food and reporting the temperatures? Anyone wants to take that?
I think it's a good idea. This is Anna. If you're in feeding, you need to show up with your own thermometer. Don't expect that you'll be able to find one. Have a thermometer, and when you deploy or when you go, keep it in your pocket. Plus, even if you come across a health inspector, they're going to ask to see your thermometer. They're going to expect to see it in your pocket. So, get a thermometer. Take it with you with your red vest when you deploy, when you go out to do some feeding.
Thank you. And another challenging question for the team is, how do we handle special religious dietary needs in a remote location?
I can take that because we have several remote areas in the Gold Country, and it is challenging. The best thing I can recommend is to work with the local religious leader. Get their buy-in, get their suggestions. It is difficult to find in a place like Sacramento. Easy. I've got all kinds of kosher restaurants, delis. I've got all kinds of halal restaurants. But when you go way up north towards the border of Oregon and California, very difficult. So my suggestion is go to the local religious leader, the local temple, the local mosque, and have a conversation with them. Even though it's feeding and it's feeding people, it's really about building relationships in those steady states, in those blue skies.
And then also to add to that, until you can source it, and Mary, that's a good point to talk to that person, because they would know. They might also know where you can get the food that would be appropriate for that clientele. But it might also work to start to have vegetarian meals. So perhaps that could be your initial stopgap until you can get the other piece of it, so that you can actually get the food that you need from a more desirable source.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes left, and I'd like to leave it for Mary. And I'd like everyone to put something in the chat to share with us that the one thing that you learned today that you didn't know before. And Mary, it's all yours for covering last time's disability question.
Okay, so the question that came up quite often, because it was reported that this is the way it is in the toolkit, in the feeding toolkit, that Red Cross worker shelter worker or feeding worker may need to feed a client if they're unable to feed themselves. Michael Hernandez has circled back through all of the division and national staff, and even though that's what it says, they are saying no, that would not be the case. That if a person needed to feeding, that they would come with a attendant, and if that attendant wasn't present, then the feeding staff or shelter staff would work backwards through our health services to the county, and the county would be providing that service for the client. So it was shared as a part of what came out of the toolkit. And even though that's the way it is in the toolkit, that is not actually how we practice that. So I wanted to get back to everyone. There was a lot of questions about that last time.
Thank you. And I know we're running out of time, and I do see the question of how do we pay for meals when we're using a food truck? Come join us next week, and we'll talk about how we are going to pay our vendors. Thank you so much all for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Thank you all for attending.